Hey everyone, Boris, the host of the show. I just wanted to introduce this episode with Dr. Ashley Beckman. She's an amazing doctor that focuses on cellular detox. I know that sounds exciting, and it really is. So definitely have a listen to this whole episode. She lives in LA, so she's a wide variety of patients, from superstars all the way in between. And she's very forward thinking, so her advice is actionable. We're going to go through what's working with patients, what's not, and what tech she's using and what to look out for in the future. So without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Dr. Beckman, not Beckham.
Yes.
Nice to have you.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. And I wanted to dive right into a couple of topics that I thought would be super interesting.
Let's do it.
Acupuncture.
Sure.
I know you've trained in it, you've done it, you still do it, obviously. What drew you to that versus naturopath, medical doctor, nurse, etc.? Was there like a specific defining moment where you're like, this is my thing? Or did you kind of fall into it, somebody treated you well, and that was an eye-opening experience?
Sure. So I was very interested in nutrition and herbs. And so Chinese herbal medicine is some of the oldest and most studied. And so it was recommended to me by a teacher who I'd been studying homeopathy under that I go get an acupuncture license, right? And so the other thing is I love different types of modalities. So I work more like a naturopath, even though I'm trained and received my doctorate in Chinese medicine. But I trained with a classical homeopath for, I think, about 3 years. And I utilize a lot of different practices. And then I add in the functional medicine to that too. And then epigenetics as well. But the part about Chinese medicine that was very fascinating to me is that in general, each organ or ailment or disease has an emotional or spiritual component and a physical component. So I think that because they don't make those separate, that is something that I really gravitated toward, and just to see deeper meaning behind someone's diagnosis.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'd love to dive a little bit more, for personal gain, but also I think everyone else will appreciate Chinese medicine. You touched upon it a little bit, which is like every organ has its own needs. What, in your opinion, or maybe in the way that you've been trained on it, what actually is Chinese medicine at its like root, and how would you unpack an organ's needs?
Sure.
Like, what are some of the methodologies or ways that you do it?
Sure. So in Chinese medicine too, it's a whole system, right? So there's lifestyle is huge. That includes food. That includes taking herbs, not supplements, herbs.
Okay.
And it includes movement, right? So it could be qigong. It often includes meditation. So a lot of ways to reduce stress are part of a protocol. And then again, there's acupuncture, which is more of the modality of using the needles to bring balance back to the body, right? So there's a lot of different things that include Chinese medicine. But acupuncture was really a big piece of when I was in clinical practice. So I saw 30 people a day. It was really busy, just fast paced, especially for acupuncture. That's not as common. If you think of like a very relaxing treatment and things like that, this was a little bit different, more functional medicine clinic, right?
Okay.
So, but the thing is with the Chinese medicine, for example, a lot of times people will come in and let's say someone had depression, right? So that points us generally to the organs that are either the liver or the heart. So is this created from some sort of incident in someone's life? Or is it a nutritional deficiency, right? Or again, is the liver impacted by some sort of toxin that is causing it to be deficient? Where on the opposite, when often the liver gets congested and it results in an angry, irritable person, it still points to the liver, right? So it's really cool because all of the different organs are associated with emotions, the season, a color, a taste. And so you can use these as really cool diagnostic tools.
Love it. Just so that everybody can understand it a little bit better.
Yes.
what are those diagnostic tools? Like, are you actually able to say your liver is messed up because of an emotional event, or your liver is messed up because of a toxin? Like, how would you extrapolate that data? I just want to make it real for the listener so that they have an idea of how this actually works versus still having questions.
So if you know me, I love labs, right? So I do love to check for toxins. I love to look at labs and blood work and track data. So I think that that can give you a lot of information. And then a lot of questions, right, in the intake process, because that's where you're going to uncover, you're asking about emotional issues or big traumas in someone's life, or have they moved? Did a spouse die, a family member die, any sort of trauma? And again, what happened when your mom was pregnant with you? That impacts kids so much when they're in utero of what's happening. And so a lot of that isn't always, you can't always find that on a lab, right? So it's definitely a lot of conversation. I spend a lot of time with my clients and they have really customized care. So we're trying to dig deep and see what could be something that maybe a practitioner overlooked. And then because it's a lens through Chinese medicine, we just see things differently. And then I add on, right, the genetic piece, which is what is a possibility of something you might have. So it's kind of like a blueprint of possibilities. And then life comes and turns those things on. It could be a toxin, a trauma, or all the good lifestyle habits we have can keep you healthy and make it so that you don't get some of those things that genetically you might be predisposed to.
Gotcha. So essentially, I'm just going to paraphrase back to you to make sure I understood and to clarify. We do labs, obviously, and if those look okay, but you're still seeing symptoms or that person is complaining, then you're digging into them basically through verbal or non-verbal communication to figure out what's going on. And that could be, we found out that 5 years ago you were eating eggs and your parents were arguing, and
So
you've now
sometimes,
correlated
yeah.
that. I'm going like all the way to like various ways that you could uncover it.
Yeah.
What would be a way that you would uncover it if the labs look okay,
Yes.
but there's still an issue? A, how do you know that there's an issue? Are they just telling you? Are you sensing it in them? And then B, what would be a conversation you would have? Maybe a specific example would be great of, so everything looked fine until I talked to them and they gave me these cues.
So we'll touch on this piece, right? So mindset's really huge with getting better, right? I guess I'd say with your health history. And so basically a lot of people are really stuck in a diagnosis, right? And they're searching a diagnosis, or many. And so something that I think is important as a practitioner is listening to how your client speaks, right? Are they more in kind of this always ruffles feathers, but victim mindset, right? Do they think that they're ever going to get better? Are they gaining any sort of secondary gain by being sick? And again, that's a really touchy subject. But, we have these patterns in relationships within family or spouses and things like that. And sometimes people are actually getting something that they need or needed that they didn't get as a child in their current relationships, right? So that takes a lot of just talking to the client, but listening a lot too, and just hear how they describe about their symptoms, because they're usually coming to me with a lot of symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And so um, I don't always sense those things, right? They're usually coming to me with quite a long list. And then it's my job to uncover what could be the cause of them, right?
Gotcha. So correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I nailed it. Through conversations with the patient, you're essentially looking for patterns that show you if they believe they can get better, because if they can't, then basically they're always going to hinder progress.
Yes.
And I think that's a super important point that is always underlooked, right? It's how are you approaching as a patient? I can give you the best protocol. I can give
Yeah.
you the best supplement. I can give you the best diagnosis. You can trust me all you want. But if you can't trust yourself and believe that that's a possibility,
Yeah.
which, I love your viewpoint on this. I think it's common to be like, you are this diagnosis and that's your identity, and if that's like, if this is something that's for life, people will take that on and then not even try, right? And
Yeah.
so do you feel like the not believing in yourself just makes you subconsciously make decisions that are going to sabotage progress? Or is it more because you don't believe in yourself, you try less iterations of getting better, and therefore we never get to a combination of healing? Or is it both?
I'd say it could be both, but what I see more often, right? You get people that also, I mean, if you think of how inundated people are with information at this time, right? They're often consuming so much information and none of it's really tailored to them individually, which is why it's so important to work with a practitioner who's looking at your labs, your genetics, the whatever labs you've run, and then your lifestyle, and then what your symptoms are.
Right.
So, with that being said, yeah, I think that a lot of clients are so tied to something that they got diagnosed with that they feel because their doctor told them this is something you'll have for life.
Right.
Where in our field, we're looking for the root causes. And often when you remove those and clean things up, which can take years, often that diagnosis is not really doesn't matter anymore because it's not shown on labs.
Right.
But then if you talk to the doctor, they say, oh, well, I don't know why it's gone, but you still have Hashimoto's or you still have lupus, right?
Yeah.
But the markers are in normal range now.
Yeah.
And so we see this all the time. And it's so sad because this person is told, usually there's nothing you can do. And so they had to go out of their way and not believe that initially and say, I think that there are other ways I could support my body, right?
Yeah.
But then unfortunately, they're just keep getting information that says like this is incurable or whatever the words are, right?
Yeah.
That you're wasting your time. The supplements don't help, right? Lifestyle doesn't do that much, right? I've had so many ridiculous statements that have come from different types of doctors to my clients. And it's sad for me because they didn't necessarily know better where, we see this all the time. We see things go away that supposedly can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's sad because you have to have it's weird because they have faith and they're looking for answers. Yet then, yeah, they're subconsciously, they're still sabotaging things a bit because even, I had one client recently, who was saying, well, I don't even know if any of these supplements do anything. And I said, are you thinking that when you're taking them?
Right.
I said, if that's what's happening, we have to work on that first. Like you have to reshift and know that whatever, I or whomever has given you is going to help you, right? You can't just sit there and go, oh, none of this is going to work because it won't.
Super important point, because I think I can already feel people going, it either works or it doesn't. How you think about it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
And there's actually studies that have been made, I'm sure but even better than me, but it's like, if you're eating pizza and you're with friends and you're having fun, the way that your metabolism takes that energy is much better than if you're in a dark room sitting by yourself, playing video games or something, feeling in a depressed state, right? It's like then your body takes that food that might not be super optimal, but it doesn't metabolize it as well. And I think that's a lost message.
Yeah.
I think it's not a prominent message anywhere.
Right.
Obviously, amazing practitioners and influencers as yourself are telling people about that, but it's definitely not mainstream. Do you have an opinion on why do you think that is? Right? Because a lot of people would just say that's just woo-woo. That's not based in science. And I'm actually saying right now there's studies that show that to be true. And so why has that part been suppressed in your opinion? Like, what are the powers to be or opinions to be that don't like that type of thought process, which I personally agree with?
Yeah. So I'll use a couple examples, or at least with myself, because the mind is super powerful, right? And I always look at both sides of things, right?
Yeah.
So I often look at this is why I love the spiritual aspect of Chinese medicine. And then I pair it with labs. So it's like you can see hardcore data, but you can't ignore the spiritual part, right? So for food or things like that, for example, a lot of times people, we get into this loop of like, oh, I can't eat this. I can't eat this. This does this to me. And we keep reinforcing that over and over. And I had to look at this for myself, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm someone who certain foods really bother my system. And so, but I realized how often I kept saying that. How would I ever solve that issue if I told the story, thousands of times?
Right.
Right. And so, but it's interesting because again, there were times when I could eat the foods that really bothered me, but it was like a birthday party and I was having fun, like what you were saying.
Right.
And then there's times when, you accidentally get something in a food and you're just trying to figure out what happened because I have all the symptoms, right? So your mind doesn't know that you got, let's just say gluten, right?
Sure.
So it wasn't aware and you didn't create that. But at the same time, I do believe our mind is so powerful that if you think something will be bad for you, then it will. And I think, unfortunately, maybe the negative still kind of like outperforms when you're thinking the positive, right? Because we unfortunately kind of, what's the word? Default to more negative things than the positive, right? That's just unfortunately the way our subconscious works.
Yeah.
So you have to take all this power to, again, just reinforce the good things. But with that, I think the thing is you really, it has to be a part of your practice, right? And know that, again, that maybe something's temporary, you're going to get better. All these things you're doing work. I mean, the placebo effect is even a big thing. But to me, I don't discount the power of these herbs and these things that we have, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of both. You know what I mean? And I don't think we're all so dialed in that we can cure everything with meditation alone. I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza, you know what I mean? And people like him, but they've been practicing a long time. It's not like they just go to an event in 5 days and cure themselves from, these diseases. They've had a lot of years of prepping, right? And getting into that flow where we can do that. I think we all have the potential, but we kind of, we need to make our choices that really help support our system and our mind.
Yeah. I think very solid point, because even there's that famous example, I don't know if you know it, of they had 3 pockets of people and they were basically trying to improve how well they could shoot a basketball and get it in the net.
Okay.
And so one pocket of people was, you don't do anything, you don't train, you don't think about it. One pocket of people was, you visualize yourself hitting the buckets.
Yeah.
And the third group of people was, you visualize and you train actually doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And the people that didn't do anything were terrible. The people that visualized were actually, like, they significantly improved just by practicing, understanding how to do it. And then the third group was they shot and visualized and they improved, but the improvement wasn't magnitudes better than the person that just visualized.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting study because it showed exactly what you're talking about, how you're perceiving the event of the food.
Right.
It's your body then reacts to that visualization or the preface of how you're wanting to interact with the environment. And you nailed it, right? Because it's like, that is important, and I'm telling you it is, so don't ignore. Yeah.
Well, and we have too, this happens a lot because a lot of times someone who's in this field is often very empathetic or things like that. And so I would notice too, I would be talking to a client, and a lot of my clients have certain things that I've dealt with in my physical history. So again, that just happens. And you have to be careful when you're talking about symptoms, right? Because when you connect and resonate with someone who I think especially has had something that you have, it's very interesting how powerful the mind is, right? So I had a client, they had a bunch of symptoms with Lyme. And in my head, I go, that's so interesting. I never had that. The next day, I got the exact symptom.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it's because it's just so incredible how powerful our mind is, but I think when you're opening up your heart as well,
Yeah.
you create a connection and a bond with, with clients or again, just loved ones. And we have to watch our energy too, because it's just fascinating to me, right?
Yeah.
That these things can happen, and they happen all the time if you talk to people that I think work similarly.
Yeah. Absolutely. I did want to dive into ancient wisdom and modern medicine.
Yeah.
That's something that you talk about, that you preach of how you approach medicine.
Yeah.
What is ancient wisdom and what is modern medicine?
Sure. So to me, well, what's kind of interesting about it is they're very similar to me, right? There's this huge movement right now, at least in functional medicine, to look for root causes, right? And so that's modern, right? We're looking at genetics. That's really this new interesting technology, right? I love looking at that and seeing if we can maybe get some clues of what might happen to us right in the future. And so utilizing that system is really fascinating, but looking for root causes is all about the foundations of Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, right? Where they were looking and they saw everything as pathogens too. I mean, there's all these different schools of thought, right? But one big thing were different pathogens. So again, that really resonated with me since I love looking at toxins and how they can impact us. But at the same time, the whole point is always looking for balance in Chinese medicine, right? We have the elements, or we have just basically things you're always looking for balance. And when we're looking at gut health now, for example, that's the big thing. It's not necessarily killing all these things off. It's how do we restore balance and harmony to the body. And so again, I love having our tools that we have now. We have amazing things. But then utilizing these ancient practices, a lot of the things people do, they don't even realize that they're rooted in ancient Chinese medicine,
Yeah.
right? Using cold, so cold plunging, hot therapy, different types of massage, meditation, yoga. Those are all very old, right? But they're very popular now, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it, because I think a lot of people always think today is so different from where we came from,
Yep.
and your message is, correct me if I'm wrong, is like it's not that much different. It's different formats and different ways to view it, which easier, better, faster, whatever the case is, right? And then you're pinpointing more individually what that care plan should look like, because I have that information more readily available. But, if you go back to time, it's like everything came from plants or molecules.
Yeah.
Drugs are from plants, supplements are from plants. Like, it's like herbs are from plants. So it's like people sometimes argue these things, and you're like, well, what's the root of all those things comes from the same mechanisms. It's just the potency or delivery systems are different, right?
Yeah, and they'll isolate out a compound.
Right.
That as an herbalist, the whole plant was made on purpose a certain way, right? So then often when they do that, some of the things that are more toxic that were actually in the whole plant on purpose, right, are gone. And so then you get a lot of things with side effects that the whole plant medicine doesn't really do.
Well said. I want to touch on functional medicine. You've mentioned it a couple of times now. So a couple of things. One, how do you define functional medicine? I know it's root cause, and you're using, acupuncture, Chinese, you're using all these tools to get to what is making you sick or unhealthy or unoptimal, let's say, and then we're unpacking that, and we're making a care plan around that. But I also feel like it's becoming a lot more popular now than it was before. Do you have a view on why that is? Like, why has this type of medicine become more popular, and what has caused that?
Sure. So I think we're kind of seeing a bit of a bridge, right? So there's traditional medicine is actually ancient medicine, right?
Right.
And then if I won't go into the whole story, but the original colleges and things like that, and medicine, it was homeopathy, and then that shifted from a certain process. and then pharmaceuticals were introduced, right?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, then people their trust was gained, or at least was in these pharmaceuticals, and so then a lot of these ancient wisdoms and things like that were told that they weren't as effective, unfortunately. But I think that we're having this resurgence, which is great, of looking at these practices that have been around a long time that have a lot less side effects. And but the thing is if you go to a integrative doctor and all they're doing is prescribing a supplement for every single ailment, then that's not, it's better. So it is good, but it's not really still, why is this person have these deficiencies or these symptoms, right?
Yeah.
So a big part of that is important. I think there are a lot of people in that space, right? Because they're trained to see the body differently, and all the systems differently, where ideally you're looking at the body as a whole system and how do those systems all interact and play together, right?
Right.
So I think functional medicine has a really important piece. And if you are looking for the root causes of why someone's sick, that's how I would define functional medicine, right? The thing is right now, cases are so complex,
Yeah.
and I just don't think that our bodies can keep up with the amount of toxins that we're getting exposed to, right? Even 5 years ago, I knew, and this was in this, integrative practice, I knew one client that had mast cell. So now I talk to people all the time. So it seems like kids and adults are just getting exponentially more sick. The same with all the little kids that have neurological issues. I didn't have any kids that had nervous tics or things like that.
Yeah.
And I have quite a few now. And it's almost common that I hear all the time someone say, "Oh, well, I guess that's just the way it is now." You know what I mean? And that was never the case before. So there's a lot of things. I mean, there's many other contributing factors besides just environmental toxins and toxins, because our screens are a really new piece to our daily life, and that's impacting a lot. So I think, unfortunately, our bodies, we always think like we can evolve and keep up, but we're creating too many things that our system just can't keep up with detoxing us from safely.
Yeah.
And so sadly, it's resulting in people getting very sick with these complex layers of root causes, right? There's pretty much never just one root cause, unless there's something very, there could be one that kind of tips the scale over usually, but you've usually been filling your toxin bucket for years. And sadly, a lot of times this is starting in utero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With all these problems that you brought up, environment, EMF,
Yeah.
over toxification of the body, just lots of different factors hitting people at once. How are you navigating? Everything's getting more complex. How are you personally navigating getting people healthier and weaving through the complexity
Yep.
today? And do you have a theory of how you're going to approach it in the future?
So a big thing are starting with health foundations, right? Everyone always skips over them. They're the most important thing. But basically, if you ideally cook your own actual food, right? The more you can cook your food at home, the healthier you will be, just because there's so many additives. Clean water, and then you need to move your body in some way, right? You have to make sure that you have elimination every day, and then some sort of stress relief, right? If for some people that's exercise, for other people it's meditation or yoga or things like that.
Yeah.
But most people skip over a lot of these things. And then again, I know this goes with the food part, but blood sugar is a huge piece for me.
Yeah.
Because if that's not regulated well, it's very hard to then start going after toxins, right? If you're dysregulated on such a fundamental place of health, your system is spending that time trying to regulate your blood sugar, which it has to do. It's more critical, right? So then if you're trying to create detox and push that, it's not going to work very well.
Gotcha. In a world where, so for example, let's use cooking at home.
Yes.
Everybody knows it's better for you. Everybody knows they should do it.
Right.
There's so many options now. You can just go downstairs to go grab a bag of chips.
Yes. Yeah.
There's Uber Eats, there's DoorDash, there's every app. There's 5 apps now that will get you food within 10 minutes. Whatever
Crazy.
you want, usually, right?
Right.
That's very enticing because the human nature is, if I have to do less work and get the result, that's what I want to do.
Yep.
So you're essentially going against human nature in a sense,
Yeah.
because you have to put in effort and work, and so it has to become you're laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you maybe coach or get people to a place where they're motivated to even try that, and then if they do it, to stick to doing that?
Sure. So maybe there's 2 things, right? So money's always motivating, right? It's actually quite expensive to buy all of your food and get it delivered,
Yeah,
right? I think people forget about that sometimes because of the ease,
sure.
right?
They do. Yeah,
And
absolutely they do.
yeah, and then secondly, if you ate pretty clean for about a week, you would notice such a difference in how you feel that once you start to eat food from restaurants again very regularly,
Yeah.
you would generally feel more discomfort or pain. And
Yeah.
again, pain is very motivating too. But it's also kind of downplayed. People just go, "Oh, I probably have arthritis," or, I didn't exercise enough or exercise too much. So again, I think pain is very motivating. And then the financial piece. But unfortunately, it's true. People just want something quick and easy and fast. And then the other thing I talk about with clients is you don't realize how powerful these microbes are in your body that are driving your cravings, right? So unfortunately, when you keep feeding them, like sweets or a lot of carbs or things like that, or just refined foods, that is the food that they require to survive. So they will just want more, and they send the messages to your brain, and that is what you will make so many choices based on these overgrowth of bacteria and yeast in the gut. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with willpower. It's literally they're very strong and powerful.
Yeah, I think the best example I personally have of that is I've never been a big soda drinker, like Coke
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And if I go a really long time without having anything like that,
Yeah.
I love water, and it's like most of what I drink. And then when I taste a Coke, it tastes terrible, but like 4 or 5 sips in, it starts to taste really good. And if I have the whole thing, I literally think about it for days.
Yeah.
Like, my brain is like, you should go get a Diet Coke. And
Yep.
it's like, this never used to happen.
Yep.
Why is it popping up now? And I think you explained it beautifully. These are like actual triggers in my biology that are going, these are the things that are quick energy that we really, really want. And it's addictive, right? And,
and
it's a really good
reward.
point.
Yeah.
It's a reward. It's a reward, right? And it's also dope. If we're going to get into it, like, your brain likes it, so the whole system loves that type of feeling.
Yep.
And those companies, whether good or bad doesn't matter, they optimize for you wanting their product, right?
Yes.
And then it's a really big battle. And I've seen people, they'll drink like 24 cans of pop a day.
Yeah.
And
I've heard of that, yeah.
And they can't even function without doing that. And it's like, maybe to me and you, that's like almost unbelievable. And I'm sure you've had maybe clients and stuff like that where you go, how did you get to that point, right?
Oh, right.
And I think the point that you're making is, it wasn't a conscious decision.
Yeah.
It was 1, and then it was 2 a day, and then it was 3 a day, and then it was 5 a day, and now it's like, that's the only thing I can drink. I actually know some family members, they, like, one person said to me, I don't drink water. And I was like, what do you drink? They're like, I just drink Pepsi every day.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't ever give advice unless it's asked for. But my head went, like
how
you've
did
been
that
going
happen?
30 years and you have never drank. Like, basically they just will never drink water, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is an addiction.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get off of it, then that's a problem.
And it's crazy too because we can't forget some of those basic questions, right? Like, and again, it comes back to foundations, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed sleep on that one. So again, getting to bed early is a huge part of foundations.
Yeah.
But in these daily habits we have, there's usually something that's really derailing your health, right? And so again, it gets overlooked, but often it's like, what kind of water are you drinking? And are you even drinking water? And if so, how much? Right?
Yeah.
Because even just the other day, I was talking to she was a new client, and I said, well, what kind of water are you drinking? And, and she said, tap. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that has not even crossed my mind. Right. But those are just key foundations that she could already feel much better by switching, just a few things.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and you work with a lot of patients, so I'd love your input. Do you feel like these very basic things just are completely missed with most people?
Yes. Yeah. And it's usually something, that's what I mean. It's good to listen to your clients and let them give you all of their excuses of why they can't do these things, right?
Right.
So usually sugar, alcohol, and sleep, going to bed too late are really big ones that no one wants to change.
Right. How do you get them to do it?
Well, so, I mean, for sleep, for sure, in one regard, if someone's dealing with weight or things like that or brain fog, I mean, the hours before midnight are extra recuperative, right? So it's critical to go to bed. 11 would be the max latest, ideally. Also, and again, if they're spending, investing on working with you and they have a certain goal, and let's just say it's about detox or weight loss or metabolism, if you show them how them staying up till midnight is actually hindering their process, then often sometimes that's what they need, right? It can just be swapping things out to understand like why this is actually impacting what we're doing or what we're trying to do. And your habits are slowing down the process.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So essentially it's you align them with the goal that they want, and then you explain to them what they're doing is against that goal.
Yes.
To make them understand the real reason. Because I'm sure most people, they hear you should go to bed early, you should exercise, you should eat well.
Yeah. It goes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. It's
like
almost,
I've heard this 100 times.
yeah, it's almost like white noise.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
These foundational things are like white noise to them.
Right.
And then the same, or, let's just say the alcohol thing. They're like, well, but it's, my cardiologist said it's fine. And I said, well, you're drinking wine with pesticides. You know what I mean? You're so afraid about getting, uh, I'll just say breast cancer or something. I was like, there's a huge correlation with the pesticides and wine drinking.
Right.
And what you're most afraid of in life.
Yeah.
Right? So let's cut that down and then get organic wine if you still need to have it. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So where the same sugar is the worst. No one wants to give up sugar or even modify it.
Right.
Where there are great other alternatives, there are options. But I mostly come at it of like, this is how much ideally you could have in a day. Just start looking at what you're consuming. 100% you are intaking so much more than you think.
Yeah.
By a lot.
It's a great point. I love what you shared, which is you're basically saying I meet them where they are and I explain to them the implications that they may or may not mostly didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. And then we can empower them to make a change that I'm sure you guide them through, right?
Well, and let's just say the label thing. Unfortunately, you have to learn to read labels, right? Even myself, I was really shocked one time because I had this delicious tea that I love that just says, a tad sweet, right? I flipped it over and I said, oh, okay, let's just see. Had 50 grams of sugar. I was like, this is more than you should have in 2 days. And that was not the only thing I had in the day that had something sweetened. I just, and this was a long time ago, but I thought all of these things, oh, it's organic cane sugar, so it's better, right? And it is better than high fructose corn syrup and all these things, but it still doesn't mean it wasn't impacting me a lot. And when I started to count up my little treats that I had, even though they were from Whole Foods, I thought, oh no, I'm doing these things. Again, it was a while ago, but you just buy things, you don't even think about it. Don't even look at the label. And then a lot of times the companies get sold, formulas get changed, all kinds of things. It's usually eye-opening.
Yes.
Yeah. And the solution is not then switch to diet, because then I talk to them, if they have migraines or things, about what aspartame and all of those artificial sweeteners do.
Do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's dive into what we just got into, like what is working and how you're approaching it, which is very much appreciated. And I think it shows people that there is a path. And if they work with a really good practitioner who they resonate with,
Yeah.
they will tell them. Like, I think a lot of people get really upset because people just say, you have this and take these pills and don't ask any questions.
Right.
And it's like, that's the least empowering thing you can do to somebody. It's basically, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you anything about it and then take this drug. And you're just like, well, is there anything else that I can do? Is there like paths that I can take? And it's like, no, which then they probably just don't resonate with, but
Yeah.
don't want to give up lifestyle. So they take the drug to mask symptoms. And
Right.
I think we're going to align that long term, then you see real problems.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's get into a little bit on how are you using technology, because obviously you're a businesswoman, an innovator, somebody helping a lot of people. How are you incorporating all the innovation that is positive and that can get data and results on patients in your practice to help you make better decisions, analyze data faster, allow the patient to get better outcomes? Like, I'd love to dive into that a little bit more.
Sure. So I think it's really good to have trackable data for a few reasons. A, for me to see what's actually happening versus what clients either think or what they feel is happening. And then, but more importantly, for the client to see, right? So, as a practitioner, we have a lot of methods of deducing what we think is going on with somebody. But I love to pair that with data, right? To just confirm it as well.
Yeah.
But again, then the client also sees, or again, if their family members might see. Sometimes people don't always believe their partner or child and things like that, that something's going on, right?
Yeah.
So I use Aura Ring. I think that that's great because I can really see what's going on with sleep and stress levels with HRV, movement, heart rate, even resting heart rate, things like that. And then I like using continuous glucose monitor. Just again, I know people are giving me a little bit of inaccurate information of what they're eating.
Yeah.
Right. And so this really lets me see, and them too, though, right? I'm big on protein, using meat for medicinal purposes, and all of the marketing against meat and having all this plant-based food.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks and tells me they're eating all this protein, but they're talking about hummus and, tempeh and things. And so to me, those don't count in for what I'm looking for. And so it's good for them to see that a lot of the foods or a lot of the fruit or whatever it might be, or their snacks and chips and all kinds of things are actually really impacting them all day long, right?
Mhm.
It can take them hours to recover. So again, I'm showing them, if you're really working on this, this is really impacting you negatively.
Yeah.
And so we need to clean this up. And then I guess for other technology, let's see. I'm a really big fan of meditation. So I like Brain Tap. I like their headset, and I use their app with clients. And then I would throw the labs into technology, right? Because
Sure.
it's really amazing
Yeah.
tech.
Yep.
Especially the Lyme tests are really amazing now. The mold tests, the toxin tests, pesticides, glyphosate, gut tests. And then also looking at hormones, there's really cool. Again, it uses an app, and you can just scan and see what's going on with estrogen, progesterone, and luteinizing hormone, which is just really cool. I love seeing stuff that happens like instantly.
Yeah, yeah, because it's just a nice feedback loop,
It is.
right? And the faster you have a feedback loop, the faster you can make decisions or recommendations.
Yeah.
And I think it just keeps everybody super motivated to
And
keep going.
accountable, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even myself, when I'm tracking the blood sugar, I'm like, oh, I have to write in that I, had this.
Yeah,
And like clients say that to me all the time, right? Because no one really wants to do a food journal.
totally.
But so to me, when you just throw it in with the app, if you're regulating blood sugar, it's just all there and you're seeing the actual effect.
Right.
So it does keep you accountable too.
Yeah. I think just to that point, sometimes people don't realize something I ate today affects me tomorrow or 2 days later. And it's like, that's such a powerful correlation because people always think I just ate it and that's it.
Oh, yeah.
And now they're like, in the data, we're also seeing that they're like, oh, this actually like has been crazy for 2 days. And it's super empowering for them.
And that's the whole thing. My whole goal always is how to empower people, right? Not think, oh, I got diagnosed with this, or is this something I'm going to have? And especially with the genetics, right? 90% is lifestyle, 10 is genetics. So even though that's there and we want to support what we see, every piece of, every meditation you do, every single bite of food, all of your thoughts, those impact on our data for your genes all day long.
Yeah.
So you can make a lot of changes.
Beautifully said. Last thing I want to dive into, because I'm very excited about your answer here.
Okay.
The future of healthcare. Where do you see it going? How are you personally planning for it? And what would you like it to look like?
So I would say in the world I am, it's a very small subset of healthcare. If you mean overall, I hope there's some really great shifts that are not the current trajectory, right? There's a place for pharmaceuticals, obviously, but I would hope that there's a much larger focus on lifestyle factors again and foundations for people because, again, they have a lot that they can do on a day-to-day basis. But unfortunately, I think that means also cleaning up our food supply and a whole bunch of things. But again, it's just education on choices.
Yeah.
So having probably, more affordable, healthy choices for people. In kind of like my niche of functional medicine, right? I think there's a huge, it's not a shift, but there is a lot of emphasis as well on frequency. And I love frequency medicine too, right? So there's so many devices out there. There's bioresonance scans, but again, I pair them with labs because I like to see patterns and see, you could have something show up on an energetic scan that maybe is an emotion you felt years ago, right? But it could still be impacting you of why you have a roadblock to healing at the moment.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I believe a huge piece of medicine, which again is old, some of it's old technology, is frequency. So, but again, I love to pair it with functional medicine tools we have.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Dr. Ashley Beckman, where can people find you, resonate with you, explore your content, which you put a lot of out there, or see if they want to work with you?
Sure. So most of my content's on Instagram under Dr. Ashley Beckman. And then my website is just drashley.com, drashley.com. And yeah, I love seeing if it's a good fit. Again, that you're saying it perfectly. You basically want to have really good resonance with who you're going to work with because I work with people for a long time, right? If you have something chronic or even if you're just in my kind of like yearly membership, it's a year long, but we want to make a lot of shifts and changes, right? And so I think people underestimate how long some of those things can take if you really want to make shifts and change and optimize too.
Amazing. You were an amazing guest with great insight and stories. I obviously appreciated it. I'm sure everyone else is, and hope to do it again.
Yes, of course. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.